NAACP, organized a nationwide boycott against a Disney movie in 1946, before it even hit theaters. They picketed premieres, and they wrote directly to Walt Disney, begging him to cancel the release. The executive secretary of NAACP personally warned that this one film could undo decades of civil rights progress. Disney released it anyway. It won an Academy Award. And the black actor who starred in it could not even attend his own premiere in Atlanta because of segregation laws. Disney made millions celebrating black servitude on screen, handed the black star a trophy for performing it, and could not guarantee him a seat in the theater. That film was Song of the South. And it wasn't an accident. It was the most visible piece of a system that Walt Disney had been building since 1928. A system designed to teach children how to think about race before they were old enough to question it. What most people don't realize is that Disney didn't just reflect American racism. They industrialized it. They figured out something no other studio understood, that if you can shape how a 5-year-old sees the world, you don't need to convince the adult. The adult is already built, and Disney had the perfect delivery system. Talking animals, catchy songs, magic castles, content so bright and musical that no parent would ever suspect their child was absorbing a racial hierarchy designed to feel like a bedtime story. It started with Mickey Mouse. Those early cartoons from the late 1920s and the 1930s were not just experimenting with animation, they were pulling directly from minstrel shows, the same performances where white entertainers painted their faces black for laughs. In 1933, a short called Mickey's Melrama showed Mickey and friends literally performing Uncle Tom's Cabin in blackface. Characters' faces would turn black from explosions as a punchline. Other studios did this too, but they aimed it at adults who already had their racial views locked in. Disney was the only one delivering minstrel humor directly to children and calling it wholesome family entertainment. If you're the kind of person who wants to understand how culture was designed to work against us, not just be entertained by it, hit subscribe right now. This channel exists to pull back the curtain on the things they hoped you'd never look at twice. By 1940, Disney got bolder. Fantasia, the film they marketed as high art for sophisticated audiences, originally included a black centaur character named Sunflower in the Pastoral Symphony sequence. She was drawn with every degrading stereotype imaginable, and she existed to serve the white centaurs like a plantation maid. When pressure eventually mounted, Disney did not apologize. They simply erased her from future releases and pretended she never existed. No statement, no acknowledgement, just a quiet deletion, because they were confident enough in their power to make a black character vanish from their own film without anyone noticing. A year later came Dumbo, with a group of crows who spoke an exaggerated dialect and existed solely to help a white elephant learn to fly. The lead crow was never officially named Jim Crow in the credits, but every adult in 1941 understood the reference to the segregation laws that were still destroying black lives across the South. Disney was not being subtle. They were training kids to see black characters as helpful sidekicks, entertaining, musical, useful to the white protagonist, and grateful just to be in the story. Then came World War II, and the US government confirmed what civil rights leaders already knew. Disney's ability to shape attitudes through animation was so effective that federal agencies hired them to produce military propaganda. The same studio that had spent 15 years teaching American children how to see race was now officially teaching American soldiers how to see the enemy. The government did not choose Disney by accident. They chose them because Disney had already proven they could program how people think and make them enjoy the process. But Song of the South in 1946 was the masterpiece. The film combined live action and animation to tell stories about a cheerful black man named Uncle Remus entertaining white children on what appeared to be a plantation. Disney never clarified whether slavery had ended in the film's timeline. That ambiguity was the point. It allowed audiences to imagine a world where black people were naturally content in service, happy to entertain white children, and fulfilled by their place in the racial order. James Baskett delivered a performance so undeniable that the Academy gave him an honorary Oscar. But Jim Crow laws meant he could not sit in the theater at his own Atlanta premiere. Disney was comfortable, profiting from black talent while accepting that black humanity was negotiable depending on which state you were in. When civil rights pressure intensified through the 1950s and 1960s, Disney did not defend Song of the South or argue it had historical value. They locked it in a vault, never releasing it on home video in the United States, while quietly continuing to profit from Zippity-Doo-Dah on soundtracks and in theme parks. That tells you everything. They were not ashamed of the content. They were managing the brand. The product was still making money. They just could not let you see the source material anymore. And then Disney built something even more powerful than movies. They built a physical world. When Disneyland opened in 1955, Main Street, USA presented small-town America from around 1900, barbershop quartets, horse-drawn carriages, and turn-of-the-century charm. What it did not include was a single black person. Despite the fact that black Americans were absolutely part of small-town life in 1900, Disney constructed an American fantasy where white nostalgia could exist without the mess of actual history. Frontierland told the story of westward expansion as a noble adventure. Liberty Square taught children about American history through narratives that centered white founders and treated black contributions as footnotes. These were not just rides, they were history lessons, and millions of families paid thousands of dollars to walk through them. When something costs that much and looks that polished, it does not feel like propaganda. It feels like truth. That was the real genius. Disney made their version of America feel authoritative simply by making it expensive and beautiful. Kids who grew up visiting those parks did not just have fun. They absorbed a version of national identity where white stories were the main event and everyone else was scenery. In 1956, Disney hired Floyd Norman, their first black animator. He worked on Sleeping Beauty and The Jungle Book, often the only black person in creative meetings filled with artists who had spent their careers drawing the same stereotypes civil rights groups had been fighting for decades. Norman described being welcomed by some colleagues while surrounded by a company culture that had no framework for seeing the world through anything other than white eyes. Fast forward to 2009, and Disney finally introduced their first black princess with The Princess and the Frog. But even then, critics noticed that Tiana spent most of the movie as a frog, not as a black woman. The villain practiced voodoo, reinforcing stereotypes about black spiritual traditions. And the story's emphasis on relentless hard work echoed respectability politics more than fairy tale magic. Even when Disney tried to do right, decades of racial programming had shaped their instincts so deeply that their version of a black princess still centered the audience's comfort over the character's full humanity. The most telling moment came in 2020. After George Floyd's murder and the protests that followed, Disney announced they would re-theme Splash Mountain, the ride built on Song of the South characters, to The Princess and the Frog. They added content warnings to older films on Disney+, acknowledging negative depictions of people and cultures. Those admissions came 74 years after the NAACP first begged Disney to stop. 74 years. Disney did not arrive at accountability through reflection. They arrived because the cost of silence finally exceeded the cost of change. But here is what they still will not say out loud. The warnings on Disney Plus prove that civil rights leaders were right in 1946. Every protest, every boycott, every letter, all of it was correct. Disney spent decades embedding racial hierarchy into content aimed at children, and it worked exactly as intended. Generations of kids grew up seeing white characters as universal heroes, black characters as sidekicks and servants, and American history as a story that belonged to one group of people. They did not learn to hate. They learned something more durable. They learned not to notice. And that is harder to undo than hatred, because you cannot fight something you were never taught to see. The content warnings are on the screen now. The ride has been rethemed, but the millions of children who absorbed Disney's version of the world between 1928 and today are adults now. They are teachers, executives, politicians, and parents raising the next generation. And most of them still think Disney was just entertainment. It was not entertainment. It was the most successful racial education program in American history. And the most dangerous part is that most of its graduates still do not know they enrolled. If this video made you see Disney differently, drop a comment right now. What was the moment that hit you the hardest? Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who still thinks it was all just cartoons. I'll see you in the next one. See you in